We are going to be talking today about hope, and our speaker, or I'm sorry, my co-host, Pete Van Overwall, and I'm Sandra Metzger, and we are going to give you a quick overview of some really good content for your professional learning today, just a snippet, and then we'll do a call to action, give you some things to think about over the weekend. This weekend might be a great time to maybe read an inspirational story or article or get a book and really inspire yourself with some stories of hope. And then when you start work on Monday, you have something actionable that you can do as a result of our time together today. So, Pete, what is our mission today?
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Great to be with you virtually again. I wanted to welcome the community that we're building here. We're now on episode 5, and we're well over a couple hundred people that have joined us, and some of you are joining us repeatedly, which is wonderful, and some of you joining us for the first time. But again, consider yourself within the community of people that care enough to invest in yourself. So we're pleased to share with you some insights, as Sandra alluded to. And hope is a powerful one. I'll admit, as much as I've learned what hope is and what it isn't, I'm still learning it, because now that I'm understanding it better, I'm able to apply it more deeply to really understand, where am I hopeful and where am I doubtful. But we know, at least I heard many times in my grooming through corporate life, Pete, hope is not a strategy. And in the business case, it's not. It's true. But we talk about a lot about adaptability as the new superpower that we need to continue to grow, because we know that the slowest rate of change that you or I will experience for the rest of our lives is today. And I respect all the cues out there: classic IQ, how much we know; EQ, how well we relate to others. But what has emerged in the past 5+ years is AQ, the adaptability quotient. Now, we kicked AQ off a couple sessions ago, so if you want to go deep on what AQ is, I just want to reference this now. You're welcome to go back and dive into that further. But it really is critical, because what we'll find is adaptability, by definition, is the capacity to adjust your thoughts and behaviors. That's thoughts and behaviors. It's an inside and outside job in order to effectively respond to uncertainty, what we don't know, what we can't predict, new information, didn't know that, didn't see it coming, and of course, changed circumstances. We thought it was this, we proceeded, we realized it's not. And for reference, adaptability, the quotient is skills. On the left side, these things that are muscles you can strengthen. The center is character, how we were born and how we were raised. And yes, that is where hope shows up. And last but not least, the environment. We can be adaptable, we can be hopeful, but if we're in an environment that might be toxic or fearful, or doubt is a sub part of the culture, it's going to drag down on us, and it's going to affect us and how we actually end up behaving. So the reason why hope is so powerful within the AQ framework, it has a 0.63 positive correlation to adaptability. So this is just not, someone just made it up to say, I think we need to bring hope in here. No, it's actually a statistically validated. And, just one shout out, I want to say there's someone on the call today that I know has been a thought leader globally in raising the global importance of hope. And we now have, the United Nations has established International Day of Hope. It's on July 12th. And so circle that on your calendar. I'll look to celebrate it next year, but my goal is to try to live it better between now and then, every day of my life. So I think the question is, Sandra, let me ask you, how hopeful do you think you are on a scale of 0 to 10, and why?
Well, in general, today, I'm feeling pretty hopeful. I have plans for my day, for my weekend. I know what's going on, and I know how to accomplish what I need to accomplish. I also have some exciting, events coming up and things like that. Get to go see the new grandbaby on Monday, and so I feel really hopeful. But I gotta say, it's a feeling right now. So I'm really glad that we're going through this, because I don't want it to just be a feeling I feel. I want to know how to intentionally be hopeful.
I love it. So you're going to endorse our first formula today, that hope is not luck. Luck is great. I mean, I love to find $20 in my pants pocket when I'm doing the laundry. Not that 20 bucks will buy you much anymore these days, but that's luck. And how many of us, I know I've done it. I haven't read my horoscope in a while, but anytime I read a horoscope or I open up a fortune cookie, I tend to think, well, oh, I was supposed to get this. This really means something to me. And how silly is that, that I have fallen victim of thinking that a good fortune is a source of bringing me hope. It's not that. And let's go a little bit further. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to welcome others in comments to answer the same question. On a scale of 0, you are completely doubtful, the world's going to end tomorrow, the sky is falling, all the way up to the ultimate of hope, maybe in the space of unicorns and rainbows or being overly hopeful. Where would you put yourself from 0 to 10 as it relates to your normal disposition around hopeful? You've got doubtful, hopeful, and somewhere in between, which is moderate. Welcome you to drop in a number if you're comfortable with that. If not, that's okay. Just consider it a self-reflecting question. All right, so it's not that. And it's not about being passive. It's not just about sitting back and saying, well, I hope tomorrow's weather will be better, right? Today, well, actually, the weather this morning is wonderful in Indianapolis. It hit 60 degrees, kind of a glimpse of fall ahead. But that is definitely not, sitting and waiting is not the answer, not the key, right? It's much more than that. So let's kind of take it next further. Hope is actually a cognitive process. It is active. It's something that can be intentionally pursued. And you mentioned that, Sandra, about being intentional. You want to speak a little bit more about that?
Well, I really like neuroscience and learning science, and I was reading a while back about how they can actually see on brain scans the power of hope in our brains. And again, anything that is good for us, I want to. Those are the things that I want to learn to do, or make sure I am trying to do intentionally, rather than just, you know, hoping that it happens, the passive kind of hoping. I want to have a strategy for doing it. So that thinking through and having a process is really important. So tell us how to do that, Pete.
Yes. Well, just like AQ, when I ask people how adaptable they are, most of us can come up, well, I'm rather adaptable. And we tend to think about the best case scenarios, right? When that thing, adaptability, or in this case, hope, when it was easy. But the real growth lies where the tension is. And, my philosophical statement is you can't really experience hope until you've experienced doubt. And it's that void that we need to respect, because it happens. We can't control it. It's a natural human emotion to feel doubtful, because then it helps us unlock what's underneath hope. And so, of course, to unpeel, the layers of the onion here, we're going to talk about, unlike luck, which implies chance or fate, hope involves intentional thought and behavior. And there's 3 things that makes up hope. And it stems from, yes, a formula. Hope stems from optimism, agency, and pathways. And if you're familiar with the work of C.R. Snyder, it's the psychology of hope. So going back into the neuroscience and how we as humans behave, we've been proven to be adaptable. Well, that means we have to ebb and flow between doubtfulness and hope in a very real way. So, Sandra, should I tell my story? All right. So we are prepping for our session today, and Sandra asked me, said, well, Pete, don't talk about just where you were hopeful. Talk about when you were doubtful. And I said, okay, well, I've got a very real situation here. It was just this past Wednesday. My wife and I moved our youngest daughter down to IU. A lot of Facebook pictures going on of people, bringing their young adults to university or college. And these are exciting times. But all right, fast forward to late Monday afternoon when our vehicle, we have an Atlas, an SUV, encountered an electrical problem. Now, the fortunate part is I may have caused that electrical problem, but nonetheless, nothing, you don't like it when you stub your own toe. But all of a sudden, I was at risk of not being able to deliver or support my family, my wife, my daughter, to get our gear from home down to campus down in Bloomington. And I realized that I was overcome with this fear and this worry and concern that I had caused a problem that was going to affect other people that I care about. So I was not hopeful. I was doubtful. And it was stemming from fear. Now, I am an optimistic person. This I know, sometimes to a fault, where I can be so positive that some people need to pull me back to say, hey, be realistic. This is reality, right? So yes, I was moderately optimistic, a little bit more on the cautious side. When it comes to agency, this is about, can I do this? And we're going to break this down in a second. I was pretty strong on my agency. I think I could get this done. But here's the point. I was out. I didn't have any conceived solutions. And it was the lack of pathway, the lack of planning, because this situation happened so quickly and so suddenly, where I couldn't see my way through this. And so now that I recognize that, I was able to call it out, and it allowed me to brainstorm. I thought of 3 alternatives and what I could do to get this situation remedied. I don't want to overtell the story, but we got a vehicle from my good friend of mine. He owed me a favor. It was big enough to put all of our gear in. He was happy to let me borrow it, and we drove down in style with a vehicle that got us there safely and back. So happy ending to this story. But the path I took in learning through this was really powerful. So Sandra, how can you build upon that?
Well, I think when I hear you say that and explain that, my first thought is, oh, Pete's just good at problem solving. But I love that you are being intentional about it being a hope strategy, right? And I mean, you've been working on the AQ and all the different character traits and abilities and all of that for a while. And so I think you're better at recognizing those deficiencies in hope than I am, right? So I really like that example. And so you're saying, like, you had a moment when you recognize that deficiency on that day, on Tuesday. You're like, I need a pathway, or I need to have pathways.
Yeah, no, it's true. And of course, hindsight is 2020. And that's the cool part is we get to practice what we preach. And we don't learn these things only to get good at it next time. We go through it with more awareness to get better and better. So as I'm learning about hope, I also looked it up this morning. The colors of hope traditionally are green and yellow. Interchangeably, not sure why, just green and or just yellow, but both. So I brought a little green and yellow in here to further round out my fascination and the truth behind hope. But what I thought we could do is let's bring into a business example, since many of us are managing careers, to say, what does hope look like in a work environment? So this is fictitious, of course, but we have Rachel. She happens to be a senior change leader, so someone that drives change in an organization. And her company went through a large ERP system implementation, well planned. They had all the stakeholders involved. They had to change strategy, running through the tactics. But there was some major resistance across departments due to missed deadlines and low morale. So let's say the fog came over. That was affecting everyone. Rachel could take this as a personal offense on her to say, well, I'm the change leader. How could I have let this happen? But she acknowledged that the setbacks occurred, didn't ignore it, didn't turn to a fortune cookie to say, how are we going to get out of this? In this case, she shifted to where she could build some momentum and getting some of the easier tactics deployed and getting some quick wins, which gave people some confidence to be able to say, I think we can do this. And then I love this quote, right? We can still get it right. It's just not maybe the way we thought we would get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shift of letting go and finding a new way really brings forth optimism, pathway, and agency. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good example um, of where a strategy in which you help people be hopeful isn't the same as hope as a strategy, but a strategy to help people be more hopeful, right? And I think that space. Here's the thing with optimism and agency; those two pieces. Uh, I think we want to be optimistic. Like our default is optimism. I think over time, pessimists are trained by their experiences, and they think that optimism is a waste of time. Again, not intentionally, but just as part of their thinking process, right? Or they're resetting their default. Um, and I also I know for a fact that agency is our default. Like we want to act on our own. We want to be able to uh, take our own actions. That starts from infancy, right? So often when you create a space, what Rachel did is create a space where those defaults could be there. Like uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to be optimistic. It's okay to take
Mm-hmm.
um, action on your own. It's okay to have that agency. So creating a place where she didn't have to make people. If you're making people have agency, that's not agency, right? So
Right.
she's
Yeah.
creating a space for it to
Yeah.
be okay for them to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so really that pathways is a is that example. What you have there is a really important pathways example. So often strategic plans or whatever, things that we do in business, we project plans, we have this one pathway with deadlines and
Mm-hmm.
dependencies and all of this stuff. And when something doesn't work with that one pathway, we have a hard time doing that. So this is a really good example. We could spend all day probably picking it apart and
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
actually make it happen. Um,
We wanted to start with this story in mind so you can kind of get a sense of what that looks like through my personal example, or in this case, a professional example. Because as a leader, or even as an individual contributor, where I encourage you to lead wherever you are, despite title or hierarchy, by being hopeful, we can influence an environment that is doubtful. And there's times where we have to own our own doubtfulness. What a way to be vulnerable. And leaders can be transparent to say why they're doubtful, right? But then also muster the agency of others to say, hey, let's manufacture hope together. So
mhm.
let's dive into the three areas like we've been speaking to so far. So optimism, that really is, yes, it's a belief, it's a mindset. And mindset goes back to a skill. It's rooted in positive psychology, growth versus fix, another topic for another day, but they're very much linked. The strength of a mindset can further leverage the character trait of being hopeful, right? And its positive outcomes are possible, even if what I'm looking at today, what I'm feeling today is not, right? It's possible. And that it begins this emotional swell that, as we think more positively, the physiology is embraced to think creative, we're breathing, allowing more blood and oxygen to go through our system, getting more of the creative juices flowing. And it's just this sense without knowing it that something good can happen. So maybe that's faith. You can probably put other words to this. You can send yourself good vibes, or some people it may be prayer, right? Whatever that ends up looking like, but it's just the belief that there's something on the other side. We're just not there yet. Any comments here, Sandra, before we move on?
Sorry, I muted. Uh, yeah, I think I just want to reiterate that I think we are, our default as humans is to be optimistic. So when we're having periods of pessimism, or we are around people who are pessimistic, or if you're pessimistic, people in our audience, consider what has led to that resetting of the default, right? And it could be very serious trauma, so I'm not minimizing that, but
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we want to be optimistic.
Yeah. Don't forget, folks, our intention here as we bring up these topics is to give you some solutions that you can apply. So stick a pin in this. We're going to talk about if you're feeling pessimistic, if your optimism is eroding, what's one or two things you can do to flip that. So stay tuned. Let's look at agency. Want to take this one, Sandra?
Yeah, agency is so powerful. This is something that I didn't really think about intentionally until, later as an adult. But the I like you have here on this slide, the I can do this mindset. I love watching like reels on Facebook and Instagram videos, but when the little kids are doing like affirmation statements, I love it. I love it, right?
Yes.
But agency, the belief that we can do this. When I wrote my dissertation, or when I was doing my research for my dissertation, the top the highest effect size, so what you were talking about, effect size, so the closer to one that an effect size is, the more powerful it is. The highest effect size on student learning was teacher agency. If a teacher believes I can make a difference, it had the highest of all the research done that year. So just putting it, but I put it into my research because I'm like, oh, that's so powerful. Like, does homework help? Does this help?
Yeah.
Phonics, all these things. Yeah, they all help. But like what was most powerful that year in the summary of all of the research that had been done was teacher agency. And so just the power of believing that you can, and having that capacity, and wanting to be in control, not a control freak, but being able to say, like, I'm doing this, I can do this. So powerful.
Yeah, that's great, Sandra. Thank you for sharing that. This is where I tend to think about underdog stories. When I'm watching a game and I don't really care about who wins, because I don't have a fan favorite, I'll root for the underdog just because
Yeah.
this belief that good things can happen. And
Yeah.
many of us deal with change and we feel victimized, especially when we don't have a say, we didn't see it coming and it hurts. But there's things that you can control, things that you can't control. How we show up and how we do have that positive self-talk to say, I didn't expect this. I don't really like doing it, but you know what? I can. Right? Sometimes that it takes a little while to go through that talk track, but this ability, which is ultimately empowering as human beings who are motivated and cherish our autonomy and ability to act, is at the heart of where this agency lies.
Yeah. And Pete, I think it's important that you put that in quotes, because saying things out loud, those affirmations, or whatever you want to call them, but saying those truths out loud
Yeah.
makes a huge difference in whether or not we actually believe it, even more than other people telling you, right? Like,
Great.
you have to say it. And sometimes you have to fake it until you make it, right? Like, you have to say, I can do this, I can do this, even if at first you don't believe. You can get yourself there.
Yeah, great advice. Look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself what you need to hear. Great. All right, last part is pathway. So you can have the heart, the mind, the desire, the will, but at the end of the day, you got to put your shoes on, got to put your gloves on. You have to set down that path. And so it's where action comes into play. And let's be clear, it may not just be one solution. It may be a range of solutions. When I
Mhm.
realized that I just didn't have a way to really get my car repaired within 24 hours, and once I came to that reality, it allowed me to brainstorm from car rental to taking 2 to 3 vehicles to ultimately thinking about my friend. Now, that was my third idea, and that was the best one. But I had to
Mhm.
give myself permission to brainstorm and give myself pathway to find a way to get it done. I mean, what if, my best friend said, well, Pete, you can't take my car because I've got plans to do something else. Well, then I would have probably had to have gone to a fourth solution. But it ended up being very empowering to realize, okay, now I've got to do something to
Yeah.
make this all pay off. So when you have the optimism plus the agency plus the pathway, that's when you're cooking on all cylinders when it comes to hope. So as we begin to translate this, hopefully you've got a chance to really understand this, think about some things that are new to you. The final thought here is that hope is a mindset that fuels persistence, planning, and action.
Mhm.
While love sits around and waits, hope is what can help you move forward, especially when you're facing change. So, Sandra, can you walk us through these guiding questions? What should we be asking ourselves or reflecting on, perhaps over the weekend or another time?
Yeah. Well, I wrote down this question. I'm gonna go through these too, but before you get to these three questions, think about, where am I hope deficient, right? So which of these areas might I be more deficient in? And it might be all three, but like Pete, you might realize this is the one area that I need to kind of beef up. And remember, we can ask these questions ask them of each other, but also think about them, reflect on them in service of each other as well. So thinking about optimism, when you look ahead, what opportunities do you see? You have immediate challenges. What do you want to see? So that optimism, where can you find that optimism? Agency, what strengths or actions are within your control, right? You might even have to draw it out on a piece of paper. What's in my control circle, what's out. But whatever is within your control, can you act on it? How can you act on it? Will you act on it? When should you act on it? Pathways. Pete and I have talked about this a lot now today, but again, if your first plan isn't working, or what looks like you are supposed to be doing is falling apart, what are the other paths or routes to that same goal? Get into a space where you can think about other pathways, have other people's ideas. So often, getting an idea from someone else temporarily makes us feel like then we're not in control. Intentionally choose to accept the ideas of other people, have
Mhm.
agency about uh, acting on someone else's idea. You're not a victim because you have to go with your wife's idea because she was right the first time or something like that. Um, but yeah, so
I
think
love
about
that.
those questions as you look for those areas of deficiency in your hope formula.
That's great. Thank you, Sandra. All right, so call to action. There's 5 things in here we're going to ask you to consider. And maybe you only need to look at one. So we talked about reframe setbacks with optimism. So this thing that came your way that's causing you to be pessimistic, reframe it to say, well, wait a minute. I wouldn't have looked at this issue until I had been faced with a challenge. Challenges come our way. They're just learning opportunities. They fuel the opportunity to get something to make better. Otherwise, you just still be stuck in the status quo and you won't realize it. Right. So how can you take what's a burden, reframe it as an opportunity? And that does require some self-talk and some intentionality about looking not at it this way, but looking at it this way. And then strengthen your agency through small wins. Perhaps as you're grasping this issue that is causing you to feel doubtful, you might want to play the movie back in your own mind. Well, how have I encountered other things that maybe weren't just like this, but similar to this in the past? What did I do then? Or more importantly, as we're now leaning towards, the agency piece, what's the one small thing I can do today or right now that may not solve the whole problem, but just make that one step forward. That one step forward typically ends up being the hardest. But if you just look at that and say, it's just a step, I don't have to figure everything out, just take one step, then there's momentum. And then that allows you to begin to consider alternatives. It could be option A, option B, option C. Sandra, I love you inviting in the possibility for others. Folks, don't do this alone. It's okay to say, I'm feeling doubtful today to a trusted friend, a colleague, a spouse, a relative, and allow them to feed you. You know, that really goes into point number 4, surround yourselves with hopeful voices. You know, even if you're considered to be a hopeful person, but you're feeling that, you know, put yourself in a situation where you can breathe in that fresh air and feel support from others. And then practice future casting. That's just the envision to say, well, what would it look like when this is resolved? And as I've learned, what drives behavior is, well, what would it feel like when this is resolved? Bring that emotion in. So not only you're seeing it with the vision of your mind, but you're feeling it in your heart and your soul. And then you've really got momentum to do the task that's hard. So we hope this has been insightful as you think about what's really behind hope, what it is, what it's not, some guiding questions to drive your reflection, how you can apply this in your personal life and also in your professional life. A couple calls to action here. If you're ambitious and you want to do all 5, great, but maybe just pick 1 or 2. And we look forward to having you make some progress here. For those of you that have been with us, you know that when you participate, you get edge notes sent to you. We've been sending them out via PDFs, and that will be a recap of what we've talked about today. It'll provide some useful links. Of course, if you'd like to engage Sandra and I in any one-on-one conversations on this topic, we'd be delighted. Of course, we love to work with teams and companies locally or, you know, throughout the US or even globally. If there's opportunities to create value and help the team and the organization make improvements in these areas, just reach out. We'd be delighted to have those conversations. But as we look forward, it'll be here, you know, 7 days from now, next Friday, August 29th. We will be looking at how we better solve problems. So this deals with innovation, being creative. It deals with change. It deals with agency. And we may even throw in a flavor of AI literacy because that's what we commit to helping you with. So how can you improve the quality of your solution by developing a clear understanding of the problem? And then most importantly, making sure that with clarity of the problem, the solutions that are generated are in scope of the person they're trying to benefit. More I'll say there, but we'll leave you hanging a little bit. Hope you can join us next Friday. And if you enjoy this, feel free to invite a friend, invite a colleague, and let's pay it forward and share the wealth. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.